watching people suffer, and you can extend that to animals. And so that's the logic in my head for a person becoming a vegan. Why do you think it's wrong? Makes sense to me, right?
Uh, because that depends on a finite understanding of suffering. So, for example, like a good example is children or pets. Actually, pets is a better example. More people are having pets these days rather than children, unfortunately. But
Oh,
but you
you
know,
don't like that?
yeah,
Oh, we can. I want to
there's
get.
problems
Let's
with that.
get into that later. Let's get into that later. But
Yeah, there's problems with that. But so the main reason, the main point I want to make is okay. Like with a pet, everybody who has a pet generally has a pet because like they like them, and so you want to make your pet happy. You know,
mm,
and so obviously, like say a dog. Dogs like to eat. So and very often people have dogs that they don't know when to stop eating. So long as you give them food, they'll keep eating. And so like we want to make our pets happy, and so like well you get them accustomed to eating a certain level of food, and then sometimes they're like you better start cutting back. You need to get them to lose weight, and obviously your dog is then unhappy. They're suffering. And so on the immediacy of it, you're like, well, but suffering is bad, and I don't want my dog to suffer, so I'll just keep giving them food. I want to keep them happy. Obviously, in like a different level, you're leading that immediate lack of suffering in one emotional sense leads to a presence of suffering later on in a physical health sense and in an emotional sense as well because of it. And so we
so,
started. So we have different
so if
levels
we,
of that.
so tell me if I'm getting your position wrong. Um, you're saying that uh, suffering in the immediate sense, so, or I should say, if you stop suffering in the immediate sense, then it can lead to long-term suffering.
Actually, a good example is
And
here. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And a good example in the United States, for example, um, is there was a time in which we hunted wolves because, well, one, wolves hurt our cattle, it hurt us economically, but also we're like, they're predators, they're a nuisance, and they killed a deer, and we like deer. Uh, well, that ended up screwing up the ecosystem, and it caused more harm, like more suffering, because now the deer had boom bust cycles. They didn't have predators, so they had a lot of babies, but they ate through all the food. They had a lot of famines, and it just caused boom and bust, boom and bust. That's a lot of suffering. And not only that, it degraded the environment for other animals and trees and species in that environment, which increased even more suffering. So, in trying to lessen one form of suffering in our immediacy, in which we didn't really understand the context of that suffering and its necessity, and why that suffering, despite the fact that it is suffering, is nonetheless a necessary suffering that is good. It leads to something good, despite how it immediately appears. Uh,
right. And so, in that same sense, I would say, would you say that uh, how we raise chickens in farms or cattle in farms, would you say that that is necessary suffering?
no, that would definitely not be necessary. Like that stuff is just plain evil. Like factory farming is plain evil. Like
Mm.
and but the
You
evil was that.
more so you're talking about okay, you're not talking about okay. So you're talking about the person who lives outside of our commercial capitalist society, who goes out, raises a cow, right, and has a little poultry thing,
Uh-huh,
and he
yep,
kills them once in a while
yep.
to feed his family. I think that's fine.
Yeah, so do
I don't
I.
think that's I don't think. Oh, now if that person were to live as a vegan, I would think that that's an even more moral life.
So would I. I agree with you actually.
You
Um,
would? Okay.
yeah, I would agree, but not in the sense of like moral, because the moral animals don't really enter into morality. Morality is
Oh,
something that belongs.
I just had this conversation with my brother, and it was so annoying.
Uh
He he told me, he said, "Look, uh, I think it makes it way simpler if you, because we were originally talking about oh, if you eat chickens, then why can't you eat dogs?" And my brother and we've had pet dogs before, which is why I
Hmm.
got a little annoyed. But my brother said, "Look, morally, I don't think it's wrong if you eat a dog. I'm not going to eat it, but that's just a personal thing, right? I can't tell someone who's eating a dog that they're wrong morally." And then I said, "Okay, fine, that makes sense." But then I would say that even within animals, according to evolution, there is a distinction with how their brains work, right? And they do. I think they do practice morality on a scale, right? Like you would notice if you I don't know if you're a science person.
Hmm.
Uh, they've studied orangutans, they've studied chimpanzees. They have societies. They have a concept of justice. They punish thieves. They play pranks on each other. They do stuff for recreation. They feel empathy, right? So, and that's the closest. Or I don't know. We haven't studied
Hmm.
into dolphins, but I would guess that dolphins, all the dolphins,
Oh,
I would
dolphins are
say, are
evil, man.
evil.
Yeah, dolphins are
Yeah,
evil.
I would say that dolphins are uniquely evil because I don't know, maybe being
Yeah,
smarter makes you evil. I
yeah.
don't know.
They
But
enjoy to rape. They enjoy to just play with
yeah,
other
yeah.
fish till they kill them.
So basically I'm trying to explain to him that we have to include animals in our morality. Otherwise it's so simplistic. You're just not looking at the world accurately if you don't include animals in your morality. And so and then I said, look, I personally, um, I'm not a vegan. I think vegans are right morally. So I say I'm a hypocrite and a bad person, and I have to bite that bullet. But even in eating meat, there is a separation. I think if you eat chickens and fish, I think that's better morally than if you eat a cow or a dog or a pig because of the way they are, right?
Hmm.
Because they participate in morality more than a chicken who eats its own babies or a pigeon who eats its own child,
Uh,
right? You're not going to see that behavior in a dog or in a higher class evolutionarily, right? So I think that you can make fine distinctions based on that, but at the end of the day, I think you're still a bad person. So I have to say that I am a bad person.
I don't consider that. Actually, the fact that you recognize that definitely puts you on the path of goodness already. So here's my reasoning for it. So morality, in my view, is a very strict thing, and morality, you can only engage in morality with other beings that engage in morality. So by morality, I means that you are able to make rational claims which other people understand and can respect. So like we can all respect we shouldn't murder, and there's a general understanding. There's also a social objective understanding. There are laws and things. But we come together, and even though there's people, obviously there's people who disagree, and they commit crimes, and we put them in jail, and we put them to death sometimes. But we can have a
Right.
discussion with a human being about this. We can't really have a discussion and an agreement with any other animal that we ever encountered about this. We can set, behaviors in which, we can have rapport with animals, and we find that out with animals at home too. There's a certain rapport you get, and like there's a kind of intuitive understanding. But this does not yet constitute an understood thing about why a thing is wrong, and like why I should engage in it. Rather, like animals do it intuitively. So any social animal, for example, has to have what appears to be an order of hierarchy. Actually, Kant.
I think I think we do it intuitively as well
We do, we
at
do,
some level.
we do, especially when we're children. But later on, when we get to adulthood, there is a point in which we develop the capacities to understand, and we demand a certain understanding for like why can't I do this or why should I do this. It's just
Right,
part of
that's
this.
true.
Yeah, so that's just part of that rational structure. Um, Something you might have not heard of is there's a
So then,
distinction.
this might be perfect then. Then in my mind, orangutans and chimpanzees would be the equivalent of children on the moral scale. They participate on the same level, and even dogs you could put on the same level, basically, right?
Yeah, and I can see why you say that. In my view, that doesn't work because in the position that Hegelianism takes, kinds matter. So you don't have abstract, universal like rules that apply indifferent to what a being is. So we know that a dog, despite the fact that it might be as intelligent as a 2-year-old, or I think like the smartest dogs get to like supposed to be as intelligent as a 3-year-old. Though I don't think so. I think like
Oh,
chimp.
dude, some dogs I've seen like what are they called? The mountain dogs, they do farm work. They
Oh yeah,
raise
yeah.
other, they're so smart.
Yeah, they're
They,
very
so yeah.
intelligent, which is very clear. But the kind of intelligence we're talking about is a purely conceptual cognitive intelligence, which is what is uniquely human. So, with a human, there are certain things that we afford to children because they are of a certain kind. They are a rational kind. They're expected that if they are properly developed, they will grow into the kind of being that can respect and understand moral rules and it can also give justification for their actions.
Right,
And
right.
we
But
can't
ultimately, I
expect
think,
that. We can't expect that from
uh,
animals. There's no animal that does that besides us.
right, right, right. And I understand the rationale and logic behind. Now, you're explaining that this is why we would place human children higher. And I agree, by the way, that we should place human children higher than animals, obviously.
Mhm.
But uh, um, at the end of the day, and this is what my brother said. He said, at the end of the day, it's just a speciesist. You're just a speciesist, and I'm a speciesist, right? And I said,
And
and that's
there's nothing
fine.
wrong with it. Yeah, there's people say that as
Yeah,
it's wrong, but it's not just a
and
merely
there's nothing wrong
species
with that.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not merely a species thing. It's not, oh, they're not human beings biologically. If there were aliens that looked like, like octopuses or whatever, but they had language and they had like societies and cultures and they would communicate with us, they would be
Human ethics
afforded,
would probably apply. Yeah.
yeah, universal ethics has to apply to them. They would enter into that sphere. So, if we try to enslave them, we would be doing something clearly immoral. With regards to animals, animals are technically not slaves because that terminology only relates to a rational being that would be free were it not the case that they were not being subjugated.
I
They were
mean,
being
I'm
subjugated.
sure, people have had this conversation so many times, but if there was an alien for whom we were like dogs, like on a mental level, we would not be on their morality, right?
Um, yeah, that's a misunderstanding of what reason is. So, like, for example, if there are aliens that are smarter than us, they think faster, they can compute faster, and, they might even have
Like
senses.
to them, we are dogs,
Yeah,
basically.
well, it's not even that, because even if they were smarter by a lot, and they had just like faster brains and everything, and like they just had a longer history
No,
as
they just
well.
no, 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 no. Like I'm sure it's hard to imagine because it's hypothetical. But imagine it's basically like this, right? Like you're saying that if we think in 3D, dogs are thinking in 2D,
Mm.
right? Basically, I'm saying imagine there's an alien species that's thinking in 4D,
Yeah,
right?
that's
There's
that's
another
exactly
dimension.
yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say right after that. Even if they had that, in essence, they're still just like us. They know more than us, so they would be aware of certain things that we aren't aware of, and perhaps because of what we are, we could not become aware of. But they would still be able to communicate with us. Now, whether they wanted to communicate with us is a whole different thing. But they would be able to, they are more than able to recognize that we are
See,
rational
that's
beings.
I think that's an assumption.
No, it's not
How
an
did you know that
assumption.
they would be?
I have an absolute proof of this. It's called the science of logic. It's about how thought thinks itself, and any being that will think this way. If they have other accesses to different senses and modalities, makes no difference. So again, like these beings would recognize that we are rational beings. They would also recognize, well, they don't know anywhere near as much as we do, and they can't know anywhere near as much as we do. But they would know that we are someone you could communicate with, you can give explanations to. So they would not be justified in treating us like cattle. They would not be justified in treating us like ants because the relationship is not of that kind. The relationship is more of a teenager who has begun to reason and a 70-year-old wise man who spent his a lifetime learning many things. The wise man can say something. Look, you ought to do this and that, and the teenager's like, well, why? Well, the wise man has a whole lot of experience, and a lot of that experience is just experience that you gain through life. Nobody can really tell you. There's certain things that you just learn from doing it yourself, and only then does the explanation make sense. So these beings could be the kind that they've experienced things that we just don't. And even if they try to explain to us why we ought to do something or not do something, we just wouldn't understand it. Not because it's like beyond the capacity of understanding as such, but because we don't experience it. So, like, it'd be like something like Ganesha coming down and telling us about like things in the spiritual world which normally we don't perceive. To us it would be a bunch of words and we wouldn't really understand what he's talking about. But were we able to perceive the spiritual world, we would understand.
Well, I mean, if Ganesh is coming down, we probably understand. But um, I get what you're saying. I get what
Mm,
you're saying.
yeah.
Um, it's interesting, it is interesting. You could just say someone who is arguing in bad faith could just say, "Oh, you're just saying this because you're human," you know.
Mhm.
But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so there may be things that they would do which might ignore our rational agency, mainly because we wouldn't understand and they see no point in telling us. Just like how a parent at a certain point when you're a child, they do things that are
Hmm.
right for you and you don't
But
understand them.
again, you are assuming that they're good, right? Because we all know dolphins
Right,
are
right,
evil.
right, 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 right.
That
And this is always assuming that or that a rational being would be good. Obviously, if they're evil, then to then claim, oh well, maybe their morality is different to ours. No, they're being immoral and they know it. They just don't care. You still here? Did he DC? Did I DC? Hello, hello.
Hello.
Okay, I think he probably DC'd.
Yo, sorry, I got a call. My bad, bro.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. I assume that you DC'd for a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, so that so in my position, that issue of the aliens is a non-issue because if they were rational and they wanted to be good, they would be good, and they would have some engagement with us. They couldn't treat us the same way that we treat animals. But my position also entails something with regards to treating animals well, but not. It is moral, but it's not moral in relationship to the animal. It's moral in relationship to us. So one of the interests, and this is something that people, it is an old argument, but people are not aware of it, which is we have duties to be human. We have duties to like being human, to be the kind of being that we are. Kant doesn't think animals are part of the moral sphere. And a lot of people will go like, well, so since stuff like suffering is not really a good measure for why you should or should do not do anything. There's plenty of times where suffering is actually good in the short term because it leads to a long-term greater effect. And a lot of people will call that consequentialist, but it's not really consequentialist in the way that consequentialism is normally called. Because what people mean by consequentialism usually is, oh, I know consequences that will result in that are better or worse given whatever action I'm going to take. Well, when it comes to experience, because we experience finite things, we don't actually ever know the full consequence of anything that we do. So we don't know the real consequences of anything. So like the example of the person who like loves their dog and they're like, I just want to make my dog happy, and suppose that they're just ignorant and they just keep giving their dog food because it makes them happy, and happiness is good. And down the line their dog is obese and has a lot of health problems, and that's bad. And that's a simple one to see. A much harder one to see is we see in history, like for example fossil fuels. And I'm taking the standard line here, even though I will admit to you I don't actually believe it. But but when it comes to fossil fuels like gasoline and oil and all this stuff, we found it is a very good power supply, very cheap overall compared to everything else we had, and we've used that to develop the world immensely. And now supposedly we have global warming or we have climate change. because of the after effects consequences, which we did not foresee from what seemed to be immediately having good consequences. And that's a very short-term one that, that we've had. Historically, there's been plenty of things. Many people would say like, oh, well, Jesus was a good guy. He started a good religion. And, what is it? About 1,500 years later, there's a whole empire that's spreading Christianity by the sword and spreading a lot of suffering and evil in the world, right? And so that's one of the cases in which, a good thing immediately, a long way down the line ends up having a very bad result. So nobody can ever say they know what the actual result of anything actually is. So on the typical consequentialist basis, you just can't say what it is that you're actually going to accomplish. So it's not a really a moral framework at all. It's not possible. It's an unintelligible position. So the only moralities that work are categorical ones, in which there is a kind of consequence, but the consequence is not about empirical consequences; it's about logical consequences. So
by categorical, you mean like what?
Like universal. Like for example, the problem with stealing, if everybody stole, there would be no property. Because what would be the sense of saying, I have property? Who would respect it? Nobody. And the only reason we say we have property is because someone else respects that it is ours. If it's okay to take other people's stuff whenever you can, then the whole idea of property is just no-go, and therefore the whole idea of stealing doesn't even make sense anymore either. Because stealing is to take someone's property that doesn't belong to you. But if nobody really owns property.
But then it's not stealing. Then it's just taking or whatever.
Yeah, it's just taking. But the whole point is, it such a thing undermines its own being. It destroys its own logic. And that's what Kant's morality is like, where something is wrong because it destroys itself. It's contradictory. And the contradiction. The link between that to the animal thing is there's a contradiction between being cruel to animals and being human. That as a human being, I am a social animal. I have sympathy as part of my moral feelings. I have empathy as part of my moral feelings. And if I engaged in just wanton cruelty on animals or human beings, or even engage in wanton destruction of just say the environment, even if it's not a living being, just destroy my house willy-nilly or destroy a beautiful lake or whatever, just for the sake of it, I'm literally destroying my own humanity. I'm destroying the very things that make me a proper human being. So the reason to not harm animals, the reason to not engage in cruelty towards animals, for example, would be that I ought to respect my own humanity. Because the animals don't know respect. They don't have a reasoning on that level. They intuit social relationships among themselves, but they don't know I ought to respect the lion, I ought to respect the owls, or I respect the trees. They don't really have any understanding of that. They go by merely local feelings, which are group-based, rather than having a universal understanding. So the human being is the kind of being which has a universal understanding, has feelings towards that universality itself, and in acting with violence wantonly, irrationally, for no reason, against other beings, is to destroy my own essence as a human being. That's basically it. And the Hegelian standpoint is very much in line with that. That the essence of what it is to be human is to be free. Just like what we talked about the last time about free will, the relationship of freedom. The will is always seeking absolute freedom, which is freedom as such, and all that it endeavors to do in the world is to create more and more freedom. Well, part of that freedom is love. Love is a certain kind of freedom that we have, and the reality of love is the taking pleasure in the freedom of another, and this is not something limited only to human beings. It's not just I only love my wife, or I love my children, or I love my mother and father, I love my family. It also extends to many things. I love my country. I love my town. I love the earth. I love nature. All these other things. And this particularly moral feeling also engages with a lot of other things that most people don't see as moral. Yeah, most people wouldn't consider like taking care of the environment like as being a moral duty. The environment doesn't. You don't have duties to the environment.
I think I think for a lot of those questions, the way people answer is, oh, it's moral to take care of the environment because blah 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 blah. It benefits humans, and benefiting humans is moral. That's the extent of an answer you're gonna get.
Yeah, yeah. And which would be a utilitarian one because most people have no conception of what kind the human is, or if
What do you mean
they
by that?
that they don't have a proper concept of what it is to be a human being. So like to them, a human being is it's a biological thing, but they don't have a rational understanding of what we actually are as a full being that we are, not just biological, not just because we happen to be this because of evolution, but that there's a
Oh,
natural
you're talking
reason.
about you mean like a spiritual aspect?
Yeah, because we're thinking beings, we are emotional beings, we're psychological, and all those things are structures of being that we have to account for, and most people don't account for those. Most people don't account that there's a purpose to the human being. That purpose is to be free.
You know, it's because I work in medicine, I guess, but uh, like as more, as I grow older, I become like my worldview tends to become more and more, just materialist. Like in my mind, philosophically, it makes sense that um, the world will have non-material things, right? Like in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, I usually tell people I'm like a dualist or whatever, right? But I I just can't understand what people are talking about when the conversation becomes about spiritual stuff. I can't picture it in my mind. I don't know what you're talking about, You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. That's because most people have no idea what they're talking about. When I talk
Like
about the
I
spiritual,
don't
I'm just
even I don't even I stop talking when that's the subject because like.
no, yeah. Like to me,
But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the spiritual in this case just means that which is not reducible to the material. That's it. Feelings, for example, the way we relate to feelings is clearly not the way we relate to a physical body. That's not it. It's a very
See, in my mind, it's just reduces to physical stuff.
yeah, but that's not your experience of it. You don't feel physical. When I touch something physical, you feel hardness, you feel spatiality, you feel roughness, you feel pressure. But a feeling is not that. That's not the experience we have of feelings. So our reasons for like why we have feelings we may give are like, oh, there's neurons and whatnot, but that's not the feeling itself. So the feeling itself is clearly not a material phenomenon.
So, all right. So essentially, what we are talking about is the problem of consciousness, which is again the reason why I am a dualist. That's the main reason why I'm a dualist.
Yeah,
Right? It's,
yeah,
it's essentially a version of the problem of consciousness, right?
yeah. Except for me, it's not a problem. I have a full. To me, it's completely intelligible, and I understand exactly why the relationship attains. Uh, there's no problem. Like, how do we go from matter to mind? the This is
What?
actually
Okay, yeah. Please give it to me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What?
This is actually like as ancient as Aristotle. For Aristotle, well, form is the soul of matter, which just means when we talk about forms, we're talking about a body and the process by which it determines itself to be a body and maintain itself as a body. So, like the form or the soul of the atom is the forces which are moving in it and binding it as that body. The soul of an amoeba is, the capacities and powers and physical or otherwise that are moving through that and making it be the ordered thing that it is. And these things are
Yeah.
not,
And see,
and those things you can't hold.
uh,
They're not physical. You can't hold a
but
form.
but see, you can though.
No, you
Like,
can't.
see, this is what I mean because I know how the amoeba makes the ox or uses the oxygen to make the bonds to release the energy to move.
Right, but
right?
at any
Like I
point that
know how it works. You get
yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying? That's why
yeah,
I'm thinking, right?
yeah, but all that how there's a thing you can't grab. At any point you can freeze that and you can grab that body, but you can't grab the actual process of that body at all. That process transcends the body itself, and it even transcends time. It's actually unrevealed through space and time. So that process you cannot grasp. It's only present to a mind. The hand can't touch it. Only the mind can perceive it. So, I see there's a form because I am the kind of being who can perceive forms. I think forms. But if I do not think that, all I would see is a body. And I would never, ever perceive a process. I would just perceive the immediacy of a body and the effects of that body upon me. Never would anything occur to me that there is some kind of process or unity going on. And that's what a spiritual thing is. It's something that cannot be reduced to the immediacy of a body. And that is a hard thing to get.
Yeah,
Prob-
I can't visualize what you're talking about,
yeah, it's not
to
visualizable.
be honest.
It's purely intelligible. It's like motion. You can't grab motion. We can talk
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. And the way my mind works, like I have to see it, you get what I'm saying? I'm that kind of a
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think about things.
Yeah, yeah. It's a common thing.
See, this is why I like talking to people in real life, because I have a whiteboard, right? What I like to do is I like to just draw what's on my mind, and then people understand.
Mm. No, yeah. So, anyways, with the human being, like in my going back to my worldview, with the human being, like their aim point, their end point, the purpose is absolute freedom, and that entails a whole world of freedom. Because in order for me to maintain my freedom, I have to rationalize the world as much as possible to make the world as free as possible. Because if you remember last time, freedom is not just abstract chaos and on limitation. Freedom is actually very structured. The more structured and the more secure in its own being everything is, the more secure in my being I am. And, I want to live more. I am the kind of being which is by its nature the kind that makes itself more.
Mm. So, um, so, freedom is like school again, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. School is part of that, and love is part of that. Such that if I hate or if I fear, or if I'm even indifferent, I am faced with a world that limits me rather than is part of me. So if I hate nature or if I'm indifferent in nature, I'm wary of it. Nature's an other to me, and that literally makes me unfree. The way to become free in that way is for me to love it as it is. And one of the things is with this is that you have to understand that nature is nature. And you have to love. When you love somebody, you love them for who they are. You love things as they are. So a lot of these people who are against suffering, for example, they would say well, we need to find some way for the tiger not to have to eat meat, or we got to find some lab-grown meat and put the tigers in a reservation. They can't hunt the gazelle, and that will reduce suffering. But then those people don't know what nature is. Nature is the way it is for a reason. The freedom of nature is this freedom which is brutal. It's a freedom to attempt to survive. It is a freedom to engage in this dog-eat-dog cycle, in which that cycle is necessary. We know what happens when you get rid of predators. We know what happens when you get rid of prey. We know what happens when you destabilize an ecosystem, and that these ecosystems are a cycle of self-consumption. Nature is brutal. There's a lot of suffering in it, but that's the freedom of nature. And people who want to fix it are stupid, because you can't fix it. There's nothing wrong with it. The system is self-correcting. It's self-generating. We don't have to touch a single thing. The only thing that we have any business doing is minimizing the ways in which we intrude upon that system, and the ways in which we have made that system irrational and to try to rationalize it again. So, where we have taken out predators and the ecosystem has gone to shit, we need to reintroduce predators, but we also need to control them. So say wolves are reintroduced in a place and there's a lot of prey. Well, now we have to manage to make sure that the wolves are controlled. If the wolves can be controlled by the natural cycle, then we'll let that be. But if we need to enter the space to keep controlling it, then we will. That's part of securing the freedom of those beings and securing our own freedom. And since, animals eat each other, and there's nothing wrong with that. Part of what it is to be an animal is to live a life that's, very uncertain. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, that's what it is to be an animal. So us going in and occasionally hunting and eating them, there's nothing wrong with that. So long as you're not being overtly cruel, you're not just killing wantonly, it's perfectly fine. There's nothing immoral about it. And like I said, the only valid vegan impulse is the impulse to not eat animals because we love them. And and we don't have to, but we don't not have to either. Now maybe
Wait,
down
wait. You think? Wait, but didn't you say that we have to love animals?
No, not in a moral sense. So when people say, "Oh, we have to," and you say it's a moral duty to love animals, that doesn't make any sense. It's like saying you have to love your mother. If things are as they should be, you will love your parents. You will love your mother and your father because your mother and your father will be the kind of people who did the proper job to take care of you. They raised you the right way. They gave you the right care. And so you'll automatically love them. If we have a society in which people are well-adjusted, well-developed, given the capacities to be free and to have the proper interactions with nature, they will love animals. It's not a matter of we need to have laws or moral maxims or rules that say you have to love animals. You can't. You can't force love. It has to come up from within the people.
No, no, I get what you're saying, but um, uh, you said that you betray your humanity when you choose to not love animals, right? So it must be that to be human, you have to love animals.
To be
You get what I'm
fully
saying?
human, yeah, to be fully human. So I have a degree, a continuum that's available in the hierarchy of being human, in which one of the effects of becoming fully human is that you will love animals. It's like being enlightened, in India, this is a very common thing. When people become enlightened, a lot of them, they love everything. And, and enlightenment is the highest actualization.
Right.
Yeah. But, the ideal is you should become enlightened. But if you don't want to,
Well, it's okay. It's not. It's actually it depends. When you become enlightened, in a sense, you love nothing.
that
The
too.
whole point of the whole point of enlightenment is that you have shed your desire. That's the whole point of it. So it's not. I mean, it's not that it's wrong to say that they love anything. In a sense, that's true as well. But what it really is you're basically abandoning even your flesh, right? You're enlightening yourself. You're ready to, you know, be done with this world, basically.
Yeah, that's one form of enlightenment. There's other ones in which you have a connection to this world, which becomes even more radical. But yeah. At least on the surface level, we can say that it can go either way. Even though from my position, it goes only one way. And anybody who would be enlightened and say I don't really care about
I
all
mean,
this
you
stuff
mean
anymore.
you mean in I thought you were talking about like the Buddhist sense, right? Like
In the general sense,
that's
because even in the Buddhist sense, for example, there are Buddhists who, with the Bodhisattva position, they become enlightened and they love the world even more. So they sacrifice themselves more for the world and just keep reincarnating.
Right.
But you get what I'm saying, like that. In a way, it is true that you should, but it's not in a moral sense. It's the same way that you should love your parents. It's the same way that you should have good taste in food. The same way that you should have good taste in fashion. The same way that you should have good taste in movies. But not having those does not make you a bad person in a moral sense. I suppose somebody that's like well developed in every way and somehow they don't love animals. Uh, there are weird people like that to some extent.
mean, I mean, I know a bunch of people who just don't want a pet, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
just don't like, yeah, and I don't think that's weird. Like that, it's basically like there's some people who only like cats, or there's some people who only like dogs, or whatever. It's just like that. I just find it to be that, but just to the highest degree.
There's some motherfuckers that don't like animals, man. It's crazy. I
Yeah, it
love
is crazy.
I I love pit bulls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
I
people hate pit bulls.
well, I think the thing about I'm sick, excuse me. I think the thing about pit bulls is that there's some people that can't accept that they're kind of cool. You know what I mean? That they can like fuck people up. I'm not saying that's like a good thing, but they're kind of like bears or tigers. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
I think like any dog that goes above like 40 pounds can fuck people up.
Well, Rottweilers, German Shepherds, and whatnot. Shit, even boars always fuck people up too.
Uh, yeah, yeah. But my
I
point
am
about like people not liking
sorry.
animals is the only way that leads like so there's a I don't like animals, but like I don't harm them. I don't actively engage in like some active hatred. Uh, is that a bad person morally? No. Now suppose that person just like actively dislikes animals, and they're like, well, animals aren't humans. They're not part of the moral order. I have no duties to them. So like I like to like set cats on fire or something. And I'm not gonna set like the neighbor's cat. I'm not gonna set people's pets on fire. But the alley cats, they're free game. They're pests. And like it's a free country, and there's no moral injunction not to do it. Is that person a morally bad person? In this case, yes. Even though with regards to the cat, in nature, a lot of fucked up shit happens. Even cats, they will like fuck up a bird and like they will like carry animals like torn legs and gouged eyes and everything, and they'll be like fucking twitching and playing around with them. And that's pretty brutal, and that just happens in nature. So in nature, like things like that could just happen. And do the animals that do those things do them on purpose? Yeah, they totally do. They have no moral qualms about it because they're not moral beings. So could we say, well, God, the cats don't deserve it? Well, neither do the mice, and neither does anything that is predated upon. Um,
See,
the
that's
the
that's where I would disagree with
You
you. I think that they are more beings still,
you think like mice are moral beings?
to a degree. Yeah. Like,
Man,
yeah,
I
but
they
mean,
can.
not.
Hold
I
on,
mean, not mice. Not no 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 not mice specifically. Mice might not be in morality, but like any animal that's like a true omnivore, I don't think is like a cockroach or a mouse. I'm not gonna put them in the moral scale. They're gonna, they're just surviving. I'm talking about like a bear would be in the moral scale in some degree. A lion, you know, like it's
bears
not
bears will
just
kill you like randomly,
Yeah,
man.
a bear might
yeah
like be
yeah
like a bear might be tight with you for like 6 years.
and then
Like
just
he
kill
might,
you.
yeah, and then he'll be like, one day he'll be like, "Fuck this nigga, I'm eating him." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, yeah, no, I get what you're talking about, but I'm saying like I'm not talking about treatment of humans. I'm saying like how they treat each other. Do they do they have some form of a society or some form of a code of conduct, right, amongst each other, or some form of like maternal love or something? Those are the things I'm looking at when I'm thinking of animals participating in morality.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I get you. You mean like the social dynamics of wolves and stuff
Right,
like that.
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right,
I get
right.
you. I
yeah.
mean, but
There.
I gotta ask. I think do you think that like a man is like sort of that man has a duty to nature? Um, like specifically like animals. Like, do you think man is sort of like a like after this like threshold, I guess, that we pass of like knowing ourselves that we're supposed to take care of these like animals that otherwise would be immoral to us and things like that, you know? Like a pit bull, man. A pit bull is like a street nigga. A pit bull is kind of like a crip, you know what I mean? Or like a blood.
My
What do you
position is no. We don't have any duties to nature whatsoever. That we do have duties to human being, which leads to a good treatment of nature and the beings in it.
I wouldn't say that like bears are moral. I would say that there are things that are proper to bears as well as other animals, so that I don't know, maybe a bear acting towards another bear is deficient in being a bear. It acts in a certain way towards it, but it's not moral. Whereas in moral, when it comes to something moral, uh, something that has to be accountable to itself and have a knowledge of this accountability to itself, uh, so that it could be guilty, so to speak. Uh, you could say maybe you could say there's a better or worse bear uh, by comparing them and their behavior towards other bears. Uh, you know, like a cougar. It's proper to a cougar to hunt a deer and things like that. Uh, it's not. It's being a good cougar, in fact. Um, yeah, but as far as culpability, which is what we want to talk about when we start talking about morality, even a bad bear is not culpable because it doesn't. It knows not what it does. So it might be a better bear or a worse bear, but it is a bear, and so it is not moral. Uh,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I was about to dehumanize some human beings with my first instinct here, and then I had to stop myself and reframe the question I'm about to ask. Um, I don't know. I think I don't know. My gut is sort of telling me that like we're sort of we have an obligation to those that can't like understand morality. You know what I mean?
What of the
I
human
don't. I
species?
well, nah. I mean, I meant like bears, dude.
I
I
think, you know,
mean,
I think
maybe those
I,
two
I
continue.
I I don't think it's the case that all of the things that bears do they do unknowingly. I think there are some things that they do knowingly.
Well,
Like I just think about anytime you guys start talking about these analogous things, my mind just starts going to chimpanzees and orangutans and stuff, and I start thinking, some like not to the same degree, but a lot of these animals show conscious behavior. It might be to varying degrees, right?
yeah, yeah. One deny that they're conscious, and I wouldn't deny.
presumably,
I
higher
would.
animals we have afford more respect from us because we recognize uh, self-likeness in them more than in others. So insects are less of an issue to us than say a dolphin or something like that. But overall, insofar as it's a relationship of us to animals and the environment generally, it is a natural relation, and so things like hunting and so on are permissible. They're fine. We relate to them in a natural manner, in the manner they relate to us. What
I mean,
where
does
something is
that does
over
that
and above this
include
is
hunting for sport?
Yeah, I would say so.
potentially. It would involve a consideration of what is dignified for us in that relation as well, where it is fine to have this kind of natural manner of relation, but as human beings, we also have to attend to our own dignity in doing that, and that would again come to consideration of the way in which we affect ourselves by doing this, like affect.
Yeah.
The sense we have of ourselves when we do this, and it has to be something we can respect ourselves in doing. So it's like often like with like hunting in many primitive societies, there will be ritual aspects to hunting and things like that. Expressions of gratitude, kind of respect for the animals in a way. There's all sorts of different things like that, and even with modern hunters with guns and stuff like that, you can see that. I don't know. It seems like you can tell it's interesting because even though they did just shoot an animal, you can see that they care about what they're doing for a respectable hunter anyway. Like there's all kinds of codes of honor that go into stuff like this that are often practiced, and it makes sense because people don't want to feel just like an animal when they do these things.
Yeah, like just hunting, like killing for killing's sake, no. Like, killing for fun, no. But like if you kill, but it's a
What? Hold on. What's wrong with killing for killing? Wait, what's the difference between killing
it's
for killing's sake
inhuman.
and killing for fun?
I mean,
No,
like,
no,
come on.
like okay, like when I say killing for fun, like that's what I put in the bad camp, like killing for killing's sake.
Oh, I see. I see. I thought you were saying, oh, you're killing for fun.
What
Oh, that's
about
Yeah,
fine if
yeah.
it's for
what
fun.
about killing? What about killing for sport?
Even killing for sport is not just killing for fun.